December 21, 1943. A U.S. Army Air Forces bomber disappears over Alaska without a single distress call. No mayday. No final transmission. One moment it is flying through dense Arctic cloud, the next it is simply gone. Search aircraft comb the frozen wilderness for days, circling above endless white mountains and rivers locked in ice, but they find nothing. No smoke rising from the trees. No wreckage visible through the snow. No survivors signaling for help. The official report is brief and clinical. Aircraft lost, crew presumed dead. Case closed. But the Alaskan wilderness does not give up its answers so easily. On that morning, the bomber had lifted off from Ladd Field near Fairbanks, a critical cold-weather testing base during World War II. The mission was routine, a test flight designed to study how aircraft performed in brutal Arctic conditions. The 5 men aboard had no reason to believe their names would be remembered. The sky was pale, the air bitterly cold, temperatures far below zero. Below them stretched a landscape so vast and empty it seemed untouched by time. For the first hour, everything went as planned. Radio fixes were transmitted. Engines hummed steadily. The bomber pushed deeper into Alaska's interior, far from settlements, far from roads, far from help. Then the weather began to change. Clouds thickened into a heavy gray mass that swallowed the horizon. Visibility shrank until sky and ground blended into one seamless void. Inside the cockpit, the temperature was manageable, but outside it was lethal. At altitude, the air plunged toward -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice formed where it could. Metal stiffened. Systems strained. Without warning, one engine began to fail. Its steady rhythm faltered, then cut out entirely. Almost at the same time, critical instruments malfunctioned as components froze in the extreme cold. In clear skies, recovery might have been possible. Inside dense cloud with unreliable readings, the situation turned deadly in seconds. The aircraft yawed, then rolled. The pilot fought the controls, calling commands over the rising howl of wind. The bomber slipped into a spin, dropping rapidly through cloud toward unseen mountains below. Gravity pressed the crew into their seats as the altimeter unwound at a terrifying speed. There was no horizon, no visual reference, only cloud and the knowledge that somewhere beneath them lay rugged peaks buried under deep winter snow. With control slipping away and impact imminent, the order was given to bail out. There was no time for debate. The co-pilot, Leon Crane, unbuckled, forcing his stiff fingers to work despite the cold and centrifugal force. Moving through the spinning aircraft felt like fighting an invisible weight. He reached the bomb bay, forced the doors open, and was struck by a blast of Arctic air so cold it stole his breath. There was no time to look back. He jumped. For a brief moment there was only wind and darkness. Then the parachute snapped open violently, wrenching him upright. The roar of engines faded into eerie silence. Seconds later, somewhere above and hidden by cloud, the bomber struck a mountainside and exploded. Crane did not see the crash. He was descending through gray emptiness toward an unknown wilderness. He hit the ground hard, plunging deep into powder snow. When he struggled to his feet, stunned and gasping, the world around him was silent. Endless white in every direction. No smoke. No voices. No sign of the other crew members. The temperature hovered near -40. He shouted into the emptiness, hoping someone might answer. Nothing came back. The sound disappeared into the trees. He was alone, hundreds of miles from the nearest town, in the dead of an Alaskan winter. He took inventory of what he had: 2 packs of matches, a small knife, and his parachute. No food. No rifle. No sleeping bag. No map. No radio. The cold was already seeping through his clothing. He understood immediately that standing still meant death. Movement meant warmth, and warmth meant time. He gathered the parachute silk and began moving downhill toward what he believed was a river valley. Rivers meant direction. Rivers sometimes meant cabins or trappers. Night fell quickly, not gradually but like a door slamming shut. Darkness brought even colder temperatures. He wrapped himself in the parachute for protection against the wind and searched for dead spruce branches with numb hands. Building a fire became his first test. The first match failed. The second caught barely, a tiny flame flickering in the dark. He fed it carefully, shielding it with his body. That fragile fire became the thin line between life and death. He slept in short bursts, waking constantly to keep it alive. By morning, he was still alive, surprised by it. The following days blurred together. He fashioned crude insulation from strips of parachute fabric, tying them around his legs and torso. He followed the frozen river through the Charlie River Valley, believing it would eventually lead to the Yukon River and perhaps to people. He attempted to catch squirrels with sharpened sticks, but each attempt failed, costing precious energy. For 9 days he consumed nothing but water chipped from beneath river ice. Hunger became a constant ache. Frostbite crept into his fingers and toes, turning skin pale, then gray. Pain flared whenever warmth returned. He spoke to himself to stay focused, narrating tasks aloud to keep fear from taking control. By the 9th day, he understood rescue was unlikely. Waiting meant weakening. He chose to move north along the river, transforming passive survival into deliberate escape. The valley stretched endlessly. Wind erased his track. Distance deceived him. A bend in the river that appeared close could take hours to reach. Fatigue settled deep into his bones. Then, when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him completely, he saw something unnatural beneath the snow: straight lines. A cabin. He forced open the frozen door and stepped inside. The shelter had been built and stocked by a trapper. Inside were canned goods, sugar, powdered milk, a stove, stacked firewood, even a rifle. After 9 days without food, the sight made his hands tremble. He heated food slowly, careful not to shock his starving body. Warmth from the stove spread through the room and into his frozen limbs. For the first time since the crash, he felt something close to safety. He stayed there for days, regaining strength. He treated his frostbite as best he could and rationed supplies carefully. While searching the cabin, he discovered an old map of Alaska. Studying it for hours, he confirmed his location deep within the interior. Following the river north and west would eventually bring him to the Yukon River. Along that route lay small mining camps, including one called Woodchopper. It was far, but it was a destination. Restored but realistic, he built a crude sled from scrap wood, loading it with food and essential gear. In February, he set out again along the frozen river. The ice looked solid but was deceptive. At one point his foot punched through, soaking his boot. He built a fire immediately to thaw it before it froze stiff. Days later, the river nearly claimed him entirely. The ice gave way and he plunged chest-deep into freezing water. The shock stole his breath. He clawed himself out, stripped off soaked clothing, and forced numb fingers to strike a match. The fire he built that night saved his life. Then the river took his sled. The ice cracked beneath it and swallowed most of his supplies. He stood staring at the dark water where his lifeline had vanished. Turning back meant retracing miles of dangerous ice. Forward meant uncertainty. He chose forward. For 8 more days he walked, carrying what little remained. Hunger returned sharply. Frostbite pain flared with every step. Wind scoured the valley. He set small goals to keep moving. Reach the next bend, the next stand of trees. Survival narrowed to immediate task. Then, on March 10th, after nearly 3 months alone, he saw a faint line pressed into the river's surface. A sled dog trail. He crouched, hardly daring to believe it. Dogs meant people. He followed the tracks into the trees until he saw smoke rising from a cabin. A man stepped outside, stunned by the sight of the gaunt, frostbitten airman approaching through the snow. Inside that cabin, warmth and food surrounded him. He explained who he was and where he had come from. He was told he was roughly 30 miles from Woodchopper along the Yukon River. 30 miles after nearly 84 days in the wilderness, a dog team carried him the remaining distance. When he radioed his base, disbelief turned to astonishment. He had walked roughly 120 miles through one of the harshest environments on Earth with almost no survival gear. Doctors later examined him and were surprised he was alive at all. Frostbite and weight loss marked his body, but his discipline and careful decision-making had preserved him. Search teams eventually located the wreckage of the bomber scattered across a mountainside near the Charlie River, a silent reminder of how quickly routine can turn fatal in extreme conditions. His survival was not about dramatic heroic. It was about small decisions made correctly, again and again, under relentless pressure. Fire by fire, step by step, choice by choice. He did not conquer the wilderness. He endured it. In a place where silence can swallow men without a trace, he refused to disappear. His story remains one of the most extraordinary examples of human endurance, proving that survival is rarely about strength alone, but about persistence, clarity, and the refusal to surrender even when the world has already declared you dead.